It's hard to imagine the sky above Europe and Africa telling two completely different stories. Yet that's exactly what's happening right now. In one part of the world, explosions cracked the silence as Poland's air defenses lit up the night, intercepting 19 drones that were believed to be of Russian origin. In another part of the world, thousands of kilometers away, the skies over Burkina Faso welcomed the arrival of 5,000 drones from Russia, not with fear, but with applause, pride, and a kind of cautious hope. The contrast feels surreal, almost cinematic. But it's the world we're living in today. When the alarms went off in Poland, people scrambled indoors. Sirens howled across quiet neighborhoods. Families huddled together. And NATO command centers lit up like control rooms in a disaster movie. It wasn't just about drones. It was about what they represented, the possibility that the fragile peace holding Europe together might be cracking. Piece by piece. Each intercepted drone was seen as another warning shot, another brush with disaster. Officials called emergency briefings. The media looped dramatic footage, and across Europe, anxiety ran like electricity through the air. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, a very different kind of electricity was buzzing. The country's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, watched as Russian cargo planes rolled to a stop, their bellies opening to reveal sleek new drones. People gathered at the airstrip not out of fear, but out of curiosity, waving flags and snapping photos as if they were welcoming visiting dignitaries. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, trying to catch a glimpse of the futuristic machines. It was a celebration, almost like a festival, but one built around a statement that Burkina Faso will no longer wait for Western permission to defend itself. The emotional gap between these two moments is staggering. In Poland, drones are symbols of aggression, shadows of war creeping closer. In Burkina Faso, they're seen as shields, protectors of villages and marketplaces, the guardians of fragile peace in a region too often abandoned by the world. It's like watching two neighbors stare at the same storm cloud, one seeing only the threat of lightning, the other praying for the rain. When Traoré stood in front of the newly arrived drones, he didn't talk about war. He talked about trust. He said, "We are not buying fear. We are buying back trust." Those words lingered in the air, soft but heavy. You could see what he meant in the faces around him, faces worn by years of insecurity, of nights broken by gunfire, of wondering if anyone would come to help. For them, these drones are more than machines. They are a sign that their government is willing to fight for them, even if it means standing apart from old alliances and embracing new ones. Analysts are calling this one of the largest drone transfers ever recorded in West Africa. To Europe, that fact sets off alarms. To people in Burkina Faso, it sets off relief. Markets can stay open longer. Farmers can travel to their fields without fearing ambush. Children might sleep through the night without flinching at every distant bang. It's not about loving Russia or hating the West. It's about survival. About breathing for the first time without feeling like the world is holding its breath with you. But still, the timing is haunting. The same week that Europe flinched at the shadow of 19 drones, West Africa embraced the arrival of 5,000. The numbers don't just show scale, they show how fractured the world's reactions can be. In Europe, every drone is a headline. In Africa, they can be lifelines. This paradox isn't lost on anyone watching closely. It makes you wonder how two places can see the same thing and draw opposite conclusions. Like looking through opposite ends of a telescope, the geopolitical message is just as loud as the roar of those cargo plane engines. Europe, led by NATO's caution, still sees drones as tools of destruction, escalation, a slippery slope toward another continent-wide war. But in Ouagadougou, they see them as tools of self-reliance, proof that they no longer have to beg for security. For decades, African nations have been told to wait, to follow, to rely on foreign assistance that often came too late or not at all. Now, they're choosing a different path. And that choice unsettles the old balance of power more than any single drone could. The irony is sharp, almost painful. Poland's 19 drones were intercepted before they could hurt anyone, yet they shook Europe with fear. Burkina Faso's 5,000 drones haven't fired a shot, yet they filled millions with hope. It's like one continent sees ghosts in the sky while the other sees guardians. Neither is completely right or completely wrong, they're just shaped by different scars. Different memories of what happens when you're caught off guard. Across social media, reactions are split like night and day. European users warn of reckless escalation, calling the African deliveries provocations. African users flood comment sections with pride and celebration, calling it a new dawn and posting flags, fire emojis, and quotes from Traoré about sovereignty. The emotional tone couldn't be more different. For many Africans, this isn't about politics, it's about dignity. About finally being able to protect their homes without waiting for outside saviors who might never come. And yet, the tension is undeniable. Every drone, whether it's shot down in Europe or landed safely in Africa, adds weight to an already fragile balance. Diplomats whisper about escalatory symbolism. Military analysts draw lines on maps. Ordinary people just try to get through the day, holding their children a little closer, hoping the world won't tip over while they sleep. Still, when you watch the footage side by side, the crackling flashes in the cold, polished night, the warm cheers in the Burkina Faso sun, it's impossible not to feel the dissonance in your chest. The same technology that terrifies one part of the world is giving another part of the world a reason to breathe easier. Maybe that's the strangest part of this whole story. It reminds you that fear and hope can sometimes wear the same face. Depending on which way you're looking, it's fascinating how the same object can carry two completely different emotions. It's depending on where you stand. When Europe sees drones, it sees shadows in the sky, tiny buzzing omens that might carry danger. For them, every hum of propellers feels like a warning, every flicker on a radar screen a cause for alarm. That's what unfolded in Poland, where 19 Russian drones crossed into their space and were instantly shot down. The moment the first one appeared, the tension was so thick you could almost hear it in the silence of the command rooms. Fingers hovered over controls. People held their breath. NATO channels lit up like fireworks, and words like attack, escalation, and threat echoed through the halls. It wasn't just about machines. It was about fear wrapped in metal and propellers. But then, just a few days later, on another continent, the air hummed with the same sound of drones, yet this time, it carried a completely different feeling. In Burkina Faso, there weren't alarms or warning sirens. There was applause, smiles, even tears. The sight of 5,000 Russian drones arriving on their soil didn't make people duck. It made them stand taller. Children pointed at the sky, their eyes wide with wonder, while farmers clapped their dusty hands together as the convoy rolled in. For them, these weren't shadows, they were shields. Not intruders, but protectors. The same spinning blades that made Poland's air raid sirens scream made Ouagadougou's people breathe easier. It shows how deeply context shapes emotion. In Europe, surrounded by years of political tension and haunted by history's scars, drones are always assumed to be carrying something dangerous. They represent the possibility of destruction. They symbolize what might be lost. But in Africa, and especially in Burkina Faso right now, drones are seen as the opposite, a chance to not lose anything anymore. They are symbols of standing ground, of finally having something that can watch the borders at night, something that might keep danger away before it even gets close. Where Europe sees an attack, Africa sees insurance. It's strange how geography rewrites meaning. Imagine a drone gliding above a Polish city. The streets go quiet, as people look up with worry, and phones buzz with emergency alerts. Now imagine that same drone gliding over a Burkina village. Kids run after it laughing. Goats scatter, and the local elders nod in approval, seeing it as a guardian keeping watch. One sky, two reactions. One machine, two hearts. This difference isn't just about politics, it's about emotion and survival. Poland doesn't need drones to feel safe. It has layers of defense, global alliances, nuclear umbrellas. Its people can count on international treaties and powerful neighbors. Burkina Faso doesn't have that safety net. For years, its villages have lived with fear creeping in from the shadows, armed groups, violent raids, the kind of sudden danger that makes nightfall feel heavier. For them, having drones is like finally locking your door for the first time. It's not about power. It's not that Burkina people don't understand the dangers of drones. They know they can be used for destruction. They've seen what happens in other countries. But they also know they can be used to save lives, to stop attacks before they happen, to watch over remote areas that have been vulnerable for too long. That's why their arrival sparked celebration, not panic. To them, the 5,000 drones from Russia aren't a message of war. They're a message that someone finally thinks their safety matters. This emotional divide is striking. In Europe, news anchors talk about drones with grim faces. Military analysts breaking down radar data with icy voices. In Burkina Faso, people talk about drones like they talk about rain finally arriving after a long, dry season. There's hope in their tone, even pride. Because for the first time, they feel like they are choosing their future, not waiting for someone else to hand it to them. These drones don't just fly, they carry dignity on their wings. And so, while Poland scrambled jets and tightened NATO coordination, Burkina Faso threw open its runways and let the convoy roll in with cheering crowds. Both countries saw the same machines, but one saw danger in their shadows. The other saw light in their promise. It's a reminder that technology doesn't have a fixed meaning. People give it meaning. And depending on whether you live behind thick walls or in open fields, that meaning can be fear or freedom. There's something quietly powerful about the way Burkina Faso has embraced the arrival of 5,000 drones. Too many outside observers, they're just machines' metal frames with propellers and circuits. But to people on the ground in Ouagadougou and beyond, they've become something far more profound. A declaration. A statement. A whisper that says we will no longer be watched over. We will watch over ourselves. That's why so many here call them a symbol of sovereignty. Because for the first time in a long time, Burkina Faso feels like it's holding its own pen to write its future. For decades, African nations like Burkina Faso have often had to ask before they could act. Ask for funding. Ask for approval. Ask for someone else's security systems to guard their borders. Every drone flight, every military patrol, every radar installation had to come stamped with the permission of outside powers. It wasn't just policy, it became part of daily life. People grew used to seeing foreign flags on vehicles, hearing foreign accents on their radios, and waiting for someone else's help before they could feel safe. It's hard to explain the weight of that unless you've felt it yourself. The quiet heaviness of depending on someone who may not always care about your fears as much as you do. So when these 5,000 drones rolled off their transports onto Burkinabe soil, there was this almost electric shift in the air. They weren't arriving as someone else's gift to control. They were being accepted as the country's own tools. Under its own command, serving its own people, it was like watching a door that had always been locked finally swing open. Young people filmed the moment on their phones. Older men wiped at their eyes and tried to hide their smiles. The government called it a new chapter, but for the ordinary citizens, it felt like the first chapter that truly belonged to them. It's not even about the drones themselves. Not really. It's about what they represent. Sovereignty isn't just about borders on a map or flags fluttering in the wind. It's about having the power to protect what matters without needing to ask anyone's permission. It's about the small, intimate kind of dignity. Knowing your children can sleep without the distant fear of gunfire. Knowing your farms won't be abandoned because raiders are lurking beyond the horizon. Knowing that your country has your back. These drones are not just military hardware. They've become vessels for that feeling of dignity. For so long, African nations have been framed through a lens of dependency. The world talks about aid, interventions, partnerships that often come with invisible strings. It becomes easy to forget that these nations are full of people who dream of standing tall on their own. Burkina Faso's embrace of these drones has become an emotional rejection of that old story. It says, we are not just recipients, we are decision makers. We are not asking to be saved. We are choosing to stand. And you can see that pride blooming in everyday moments. In villages where people once looked nervously toward the tree line at night, they now talk about how our drones will keep watch. Kids draw pictures of them at school like they're superheroes. Street vendors chat about them between sales, like they're talking about a hometown sports team. There's this sense of ownership spreading, this idea that safety no longer has to come wrapped in someone else's flag. It can wear their own colors. It can speak their own language. This feeling of sovereignty has layers too. It's not just about defense, it's about identity. About rewriting how the world sees Burkina Faso and how Burkina people see themselves. For years, global headlines only mentioned the country when tragedy struck or when instability flared. Now, people are seeing stories about Burkina Faso taking charge, making bold choices, drawing new lines. That shift matters. It feeds something deep inside, a sense of worth that's been quietly waiting to be acknowledged. Of course, there's debate. There are critics who warn about becoming too close to Russia or who worry about how these drones might change the balance of power. But even those conversations sound different here because they're happening on Burkina terms. That's the difference. People are no longer asking, what will outsiders allow us to do? But what do we believe is right for us? That question alone marks a turning point. It's what sovereignty really feels like, not the absence of risk, but the presence of choice. And maybe that's why the moment feels almost emotional to witness. Because it's not about machines filling the sky. It's about people filling their own space, finally. It's about a country that's learning to trust its own hands again. That's why you hear people use words like freedom when they talk about the drones. Not because they think technology can solve everything, but because they sense what it stands for. A future shaped by their own will, not someone else's shadow. And in a world that has long told them they are too small to stand alone, just standing firm and unflinching feels like a victory already. There's a strange kind of poetry in the way one event can spark completely opposite emotions depending on where you stand. When news broke that Poland had shot down 19 drones believed to be linked to Russian operations, Europe reacted with sharp fear. It was as if the continent took a collective breath and held it, waiting to see what would happen next. But at the very same time, far across the Mediterranean, people in Burkina Faso were welcoming 5,000 drones from Russia with cheers, music, and something that looked a lot like joy. That emotional divide has become one of the most striking parts of this whole moment fear in the West. Hope in Africa, and it says so much about how history shapes hearts. In Europe, the fear makes sense in a way. Memories of war never fully fade, and the idea of Russian drones appearing on NATO's doorstep stirs up all those old ghosts. Even people who weren't alive during past wars seem to carry that anxiety in their bones. The hum of drones over the border sounds to them like the first drumbeats of something darker. Governments scrambled to make statements. Military analysts filled TV screens with maps and arrows. And social media